Hidden treasure worth $200 million buried beneath a struggling cattle ranch in Montana. The century-old mystery that would bring federal agents, treasure hunters, and organized crime figures racing to a remote valley. All discovered by one widow's desperate final attempt to honor her husband's cryptic final words. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning frost glittered across the withered grasslands as Elena Blackwood's worn boots crunched over the frozen ground of what had once been her family's pride. She surveyed the 1,200 acres of what locals now mockingly called Blackwood's Blunder, a cattle ranch in Sweetwater Valley, Montana, that hadn't turned a profit in 5 years and was scheduled for foreclosure in exactly 68 hours if she couldn't produce the $125,000 in back payments. At 42, Elena had never imagined herself as a rancher. She was a successful art curator at the Billings Museum of Western Heritage, someone who preferred climate-controlled galleries to harsh Montana winters. But the ranch had been in her late husband Michael's family for 3 generations, and she couldn't bear the thought of losing the last connection to the man she'd loved for 17 years. The property had been plagued with misfortune ever since Michael's grandfather had purchased it in 1942. Cattle diseases, equipment breakdowns, and 3 catastrophic droughts had driven away 4 different ranch managers. The locals whispered about the Blackwood curse. But Elena knew the real problem was simpler: outdated infrastructure, mounting debt, and the relentless competition from corporate ranching operations that had gradually squeezed out family-owned properties across Montana. "You really should just walk away," said Jack Henderson, her late husband's childhood friend and the only real estate agent willing to handle the property. He had driven out from Billings to help Elena with what everyone assumed would be her final visit before surrender. "The bank's offer to forgive the remaining debt if you sign over the deed is generous, considering the property's troubled history." Elena pulled her coat tighter against the biting Montana wind, her eyes fixed on the old ranch house that had stood since 1885. Michael had died there 8 months ago, collapsing in the basement while searching through old family records. The doctors called it an aneurysm, sudden, unpredictable, impossible to prevent. By the time Elena found him, he had been gone for hours. "I know it doesn't make financial sense," Elena replied, studying the foreclosure notice that had arrived. That morning, Sweetwater Valley Ranch, 1,200 acres, historic homestead, 1885. Original stone foundation, working well, $485,000 minimum bid. Property sold as is. No inspections due to ongoing federal land survey complications. The last line had puzzled potential buyers, but Elena had researched the survey issue. It appeared to be a routine geological assessment related to water rights that affected several ranches in the valley. Nothing that should significantly impact the ranch's value. "I can't explain it, Jack," she continued, "but I feel like I owe it to Michael to try one more time." He was so convinced this place held some kind of secret. He spent his last months obsessively researching the property's history, going through old county records, even consulting with treasure hunters and historians. Jack shook his head, kicking at a clump of frozen earth. But that was just Michael. Being Michael, always chasing dreams and treasure tailies. "Elena, you've already spent most of your savings trying to keep up with the mortgage. Your curator job barely covers your apartment rent in Billings. You can't save a ranch that's been failing for decades." Elena had done the math countless times. Between her museum salary, Michael's modest life insurance, and a loan against her retirement fund, she could maybe hold on to the property for another 3 months. Her plan was ambitious and probably foolish. Convert part of the historic ranch house into a high-end retreat focused on Western heritage and art. Partner with the museum for cultural tours, and maybe develop a small historical center highlighting the ranch's connection to Montana's gold rush era. The ranch sat along what had once been a crucial route for gold prospectors heading to Helena in the 1860s. Michael had discovered references to the property in old miners' journals, suggesting the original owner had been involved in the gold trade in ways that went beyond simple ranching. If Elena could prove this connection and get the property listed on the National Register of Historic Places, there might be grants and tourism opportunities. Have you heard back from the Montana Historical Society about the gold rush research? Jack asked as they approached the ranch house. Dr. Yellow Wolf seemed interested, Elena replied, referring to the indigenous historian who specialized in 19th century Montana history. But she needs more than family stories to support a historic designation. The documentation requirements are extensive. The wind picked up, cutting through Elena's jacket as she looked across the barren fields. The cattle herd that should have been thriving was down to just 40 head, another casualty of the severe drought that had plagued central Montana for the past 3 years. Even if she could somehow save the ranch from foreclosure, the environmental challenges seemed insurmountable. Remember when we used to come out here for summer barbecues? Elena asked, her voice carrying a note of nostalgia. Michael would drive us out from Billings, and his grandmother would have that big table set up on the front porch. The cattle were healthy then, grazing as far as you could see. Jack nodded, his expression softening. Grandma Blackwood made the best bison chili in Sweetwater County. Michael always said this place was magical, that it held secrets nobody else knew about. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe that's what I'm really trying to save, Elena admitted. Not just the property, but the secrets. The history that dies with a place when it's sold to developers or corporate ranching operations. She pulled out her phone and showed Jack the pictures Michael had taken during his research. Screenshots of old county records, photographs of faded documents, and images of the strange markings he'd found carved into the basement's stone walls. Look at this, she said, swiping through the photos. Michael found these references in the Montana State Historical Society archives, journals from prospectors in the 1860s talking about a safe house in Sweetwater Valley. They never mentioned the exact location, but the descriptions match our property perfectly. Jack studied the images, his skepticism wavering slightly. These journals are real? Copies of originals held at the Historical Society. Dr. Yellow Wolf confirmed their authenticity. But she says we need physical evidence, not just documentary references, to prove the gold rush connection. Elena showed him another photo, a crude map drawn on aged leather, showing routes through Montana with symbols marking what appeared to be caches or safe houses. One symbol, circled in Michael's handwriting, appeared to correspond to their properties. Location. Michael was convinced that the ranch house basement held evidence, she continued. He spent months down there carefully removing layers of paint and concrete, looking for hidden compartments or passages left by the original builders. And did he find anything? Jack asked. Elena hesitated. He died before he could finish his work. But in his final weeks, he was more excited than I'd seen him in years. He kept saying he was close to something big, that he'd found proof that would change everything. They reached the ranch house porch, where Michael's old rocking chair sat covered in a thin layer of ice. Elena paused, remembering the evenings they'd spent there, planning their future together. He'd been so passionate about the ranch's potential, so convinced that its history held the key to their financial salvation. Jack, what if Michael was right? What if there really is something significant here? Jack considered this carefully. Like what? A forgotten gold cache? Those are just stories old-timers tell to keep their property values up. Michael believed there was more to it than just stories. The night before he died, he called me absolutely ecstatic. He said he'd Found the entrance and needed to check one more thing before showing me. I thought he was just being dramatic, but what if he actually found something? Jack's expression turned serious. Elena, people have been searching for lost gold in Montana for over 150 years. If there was anything valuable on this property, someone would have found it by now. Maybe they weren't looking in the right place, Elena replied. Or maybe they didn't have the information Michael had. He spent years collecting historical documents, cross-referencing accounts, mapping potential locations. As they entered the ranch house, Elena felt the familiar ache of loss. Michael's presence still lingered in every room, his books on Western history stacked on the coffee table, his collection of antique mining tools displayed on the walls, his half-finished cup of coffee still sitting on his desk where she'd left it, unable to wash away this last trace of his living presence. The main floor showed signs of Michael's research obsession, walls covered with maps and timelines, bookshelves overflowing with historical accounts of Montana's gold rush, and boxes of documents obtained from archives across the state. But it was clear that his real focus had been elsewhere. He barely touched the upper floors, Elena noted. All his energy went into the basement. He was obsessed with the foundation, with the idea that the original builders had hidden something significant there. Jack examined the historical materials. With growing interest, I have to admit, Michael was thorough. This is impressive research. Michael researched the original owner, a man named Thomas Harrington, who arrived in Montana Territory in 1885. According to county records, he was a cattle rancher from Colorado who claimed to be starting a new life after the mining boom. But Michael found evidence suggesting Harrington had connections to major gold transport operations from Helena to the railroad stations. Elena led Jack to a wall where Michael had hung a timeline of his research. Photos, documents, and maps were connected by red string, creating a web of evidence that suggested the ranch's true purpose. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a photograph of a gravestone. Michael found this in the Sweetwater Valley cemetery. Thomas Harrington died in 1892, just 7 years after building the ranch house. The inscription says he was a guardian of fortune and keeper of secrets. That's an unusual epitaph for a simple rancher. It is strange, Jack agreed. And here's another interesting part. Harrington's death certificate lists the cause as injuries sustained in a riding accident. But Michael found a newspaper clipping from 1892 that mentions Harrington was found dead in his basement, apparently having fallen down the stairs. Jack frowned. That's an odd discrepancy. Michael didn't think it was a discrepancy. He thought Harrington might have been killed to keep quiet about whatever was hidden on the property. The gold rush era was over, but there were still fortunes being made and lost, and plenty of people with reasons to hide their wealth or their crimes. Elena moved toward the basement door, drawn by the same curiosity that had consumed her husband's final months. She'd avoided the basement since his death, unable to face the space where he'd drawn his last breath. But today, with foreclosure just 3 days away, she felt compelled to see what had captured his attention so completely. "I need to go down there," she said quietly. "I need to see what Michael was working on." The basement stairs creaked under their weight as they descended into the cool, dim space below. A single bare bulb hung from the stone ceiling, casting harsh shadows across the rough walls. Michael had been working to restore the original stone foundation, removing decades of paint and concrete to reveal the craftsmanship beneath. The basement was larger than typical ranch house foundations, with walls that were nearly 3 feet thick in some places. The stonework was precise and deliberate, each block fitted with the skill of a master mason. In the center of the space, Michael had set up a makeshift workspace, tables covered with tools, brushes, and chemicals for cleaning stone. His research materials were carefully organized on shelves along one wall, photographs, notes, and historical. REFERENCES, all labeled and categorized. Michael was always talking about these stones, Elena said, examining the carefully fitted blocks. He claimed they were arranged in a specific pattern, that the builders had incorporated some kind of code into the foundation itself. Jack joined her, running his hands along the restored sections. I have to admit, this is different from other basements I've seen. These stones are massive, and the way they're fitted together, it's almost like they're protecting something. Elena knelt to examine a section where Michael had been working before his death. He'd removed several layers of paint and concrete, revealing what appeared to be carved symbols on some of the stones, faint markings that looked intentional rather than random. Look at this, she said, pointing to a series of small marks etched into one stone. Michael thought these might be prospectors' symbols, codes used to communicate with other gold transporters about cache locations. The symbols were crude but deliberate, a series of lines and curves that formed patterns Elena didn't recognize. Michael had made rubbings of them, and she could see several hanging on the basement walls alongside his research materials. He documented everything, Elena continued, gesturing to the walls covered with Michael's notes, photographs, and sketches. Every symbol, every unusual stone, every measurement of the foundation. He was building a comprehensive record of the basements. Construction. Jack studied the symbols more closely. These do look intentional. If they're original to the construction, they predate any modern alterations. Elena moved to Michael's workspace, where his final notes were still spread across the table. His handwriting, normally neat and precise, had become hurried and excited. In the final weeks before his death. Listen to this, she said, reading from his last journal entry. April 18th. Found additional symbols on the north wall. Pattern suggests a sequence, possibly directions. The stones in this section show signs of being movable. I believe I'm close to finding the vault referenced in the Harrington letters. Jack looked up sharply. Vault? Elena nodded, continuing to read. April 20th. Confirmed that 3 stones on the north wall are not mortared in place. They appear to be designed to move in sequence. Tomorrow I'll attempt to access the space behind them. If the Harrington accounts are accurate, what lies beyond could change everything. The entry was dated the day before Michael's death. Elena's hands trembled as she realized how close he had been to making his discovery, and how tragically his life had been cut short, just at the moment of potential triumph. Jack, we need to check the north wall, she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Michael died trying to find this. I owe it to him to finish what he started. They moved to the north wall where Michael had cleared away. Decades of concrete and paint to reveal the original stonework. Elena could see the symbols he'd referenced in his notes, crude markings that appeared to form a pattern across several large stones. These 3, she said, pointing to a section where the stones looked slightly different from the surrounding masonry. Michael thought these could be moved. Jack examined the stones carefully. The mortar around them does look different. Newer, as if someone had removed and replaced them at some point. Elena began pressing on the stones, looking for any sign of movement or mechanism. At first, nothing happened, but as she applied pressure to the stones in the sequence indicated by the symbols, she felt a slight give in the central stone. There's something here, she said, excitement building in her voice. Help me push. Together, they applied pressure to the stone, which gradually began to move inward with a grinding sound that suggested it hadn't been disturbed in decades. As the stone receded, Elena could see darkness beyond, a space that shouldn't exist according to the basement's visible dimensions. My God, Jack whispered. Michael was right. With renewed effort, they managed to move the stone far enough to create an opening about 2 feet square, large enough for a person to crawl through. The passage beyond was dark, but Elena could see that it opened into a larger space about 10 feet in. I'm going in, she announced, already reaching for the flashlight on Michael's workbench. "Elena, wait," Jack cautioned. "We don't know what's in there. The structure could be unstable." "Michael found this, Jack. He was about to discover whatever's hidden here when he died. I need to see it through." Before Jack could object further, Elena switched on the flashlight and began maneuvering herself into the opening. The passage was tight but navigable, and after a few feet, she could feel it beginning to open up. "There's a chamber here," she called back to Jack. "It's bigger than I expected. I'm going to stand up." As Elena emerged into the hidden space, the beam of her flashlight revealed something that took her breath away. The chamber was roughly 15 feet square, with walls of precisely fitted stone rising to a vaulted ceiling. But it was what the chamber contained that made Elena's heart race. Along one wall stood a row of wooden crates, their surfaces covered with dust, but otherwise remarkably preserved in the cool, dry environment. In the center of the room sat what appeared to be an old safe, not a modern security device, but a vintage bank vault dating from the late 1800s. "Jack," Elena called, her voice echoing in the confined space. "You need to see this. It's incredible." Jack's worried face appeared in the passage opening. "What do you see?" "Crates, a safe, and what looks like mining equipment." "This is definitely a hidden storage room." Michael was right about everything. Jack squeezed through the opening, joining Elena in the hidden chamber. His expression of skepticism had been replaced by one of wonder as he surveyed the contents. "This is—" he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. This is exactly what Michael was looking for. Elena moved closer to the crates, examining them in the flashlight beam. Each was marked with faded stenciling, H and B shipping, and what appeared to be serial numbers. With trembling hands, she tried to lift the lid of the nearest crate, but found it securely nailed shut. "We'll need tools to open these," she said, turning her attention to the safe. The old vault was about 4 feet tall, its metal surface etched with decorative patterns, and the name Harrington prominently displayed on the door. "Do you think there's anything still inside?" Jack asked, examining the safe's dial mechanism. "Only one way to find out," Elena replied. "But we'll need the combination." They searched the chamber for any clues that might help them open the safe, but found nothing obvious. The mining equipment, picks, shovels, and what appeared to be old sifting pans, gave no indication of the safe's contents or how to access them. "Let's check Michael's notes," Elena suggested. He was methodical. If he found any clues about a combination, he would have documented them. They returned to the basement, where Elena began carefully reviewing Michael's final journal entries. His excitement was palpable in the hurried handwriting and exclamation points that punctuated his discoveries. "Look at this," she said, pointing to an entry dated 3 days before his death. Michael found a series of numbers carved into one of the basement stones. He thought it might be significant 1842733. "A combination?" Jack suggested. "Possibly. He notes that the sequence matches the pattern typically used for safes of that era. Right, left, right, left." They returned to the hidden chamber, where Elena carefully approached the safe. The dial mechanism was stiff with age, but still functional. With Jack holding the flashlight, she began to turn the dial according to the sequence Michael had documented. 18 right, she murmured, turning the dial slowly. 42 left, 7 right, 33 left. When she completed the sequence, she tried the handle. For a moment, nothing happened, and Elena felt a wave of disappointment. Then, with a reluctant groan of metal that hadn't moved in decades, the handle turned and the safe door began to swing open. "It worked," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The safe's interior was lined with what appeared to be lead sheeting, and contained several canvas bags, a stack of leather-bound ledgers, and a small wooden box. Elena carefully removed one of the canvas bags, which was heavier than she expected. As she loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm, she gasped. Gold coins spilled into her hand, not modern currency, but vintage double eagles, their surfaces gleaming as if they had been minted yesterday. "Jack," she said, her voice shaking. "These are $20 gold pieces from the 1880s. They're worth far more than their face value now, thousands each to collectors." Jack examined one of the coins, his expression stunned. "How many are there?" Elena quickly assessed the remaining bags. "There are 12 bags this size. If they're all full of similar coins." She turned her attention to the ledgers, carefully opening the top one to reveal pages of meticulous handwriting. The entries detailed shipments of gold from various mining operations, amounts, dates, and what appeared to be coded references to individuals involved in the transactions. "These are transaction records," she said, skimming the pages. "This wasn't just a storage facility. It was part of an organized operation moving gold from the mines to markets." "Legal operations?" Jack asked. "I'm not sure," Elena replied, continuing to examine the ledgers. "Some of these entries reference official shipments, but others mention private transactions and use code names instead of proper documentation." The wooden box was the last item in the safe. Unlike the utilitarian canvas bags and functional ledgers, it was ornately carved with what appeared to be a family crest. Elena carefully lifted the lid to reveal a collection of personal items, a pocket watch, several letters, and a small leather-bound journal. "This must have belonged to Thomas Harrington," she said, opening the journal. "It's a personal account of his activities." As she read the first few entries, Elena's understanding of the ranch's history began to shift dramatically. Thomas Harrington hadn't been a simple rancher. According to his own words, he had been a facilitator for wealthy mine owners who needed to move and store their gold outside official channels, sometimes to avoid taxes, sometimes to hide the true extent of their wealth, and sometimes for more nefarious purposes. "Listen to this," she said, reading from the journal. "March 1888, received shipment from H. Muller's operation. Official records show 60% of actual yield. Remaining 40% stored in vault for private distribution. Commissioner Williams received usual consideration for document adjustment." "He was helping mine owners hide their true production," Jack said. "Probably to avoid taxes and government oversight. And paying off officials to look the other way," Elena added. "But there's more." Harrington was skimming from these private reserves. "Listen, December 1888, added personal percentage to primary vault. Current holdings sufficient for European resettlement if arrangements with Stanford become untenable." "He was building his own fortune from what he skimmed," Jack concluded, "a middleman taking advantage of his position." "And creating an escape plan in case he was discovered," Elena added. "But he never used it. He died here in 1892. As they continued examining the safe's contents, the true scope of their discovery began to emerge. The canvas bags contained not only gold coins, but also raw gold nuggets and small ingots. The ledgers documented transactions spanning 7 years, involving some of Montana's wealthiest mining operations. And Harrington's personal journal revealed a complex web of corruption, blackmail, and theft that had allowed him to amass a significant fortune while serving as the trusted agent of powerful men. "Elena," Jack said, his voice serious, "do you realize what we found here? This isn't just a few gold coins. Based on these records and what's in these bags, we're looking at millions in historic gold, maybe tens of millions given today's collector values." Elena sat back on her heels, the implications of their discovery washing over her. The failing ranch that had seemed like such a burden now contained a treasure that could change everything. But as the initial shock began to fade, new questions emerged. "If this is all still here, why didn't Harrington use it?" she asked. According to his journal, he was planning to flee to Europe with his fortune. What stopped him? Jack examined the final entries in Harrington's journal. The last entry is dated April 15th, 1892. He died on April 22nd, according to the death certificate. There's no explanation of what happened in that final week. And how did Michael figure all this out? Elena continued. He must have found clues I haven't seen yet. They returned to the basement to review Michael's research more thoroughly. His notes revealed a methodical investigation spanning years, county records, historical accounts, geological surveys, and architectural assessments of the ranch house. Here, Elena said, finding a folder labeled Harrington Connections. Michael traced connections between Thomas Harrington and various mining operations through bank records and business filings. He discovered that Harrington had worked for Wells Fargo before coming to Montana, specifically in their gold shipment security division. So he had the perfect background knowledge to set up his own operation, Jack observed. Exactly. And Michael found references to Harrington in the private papers of several mine owners, always in context of special arrangements or private banking services. As they pieced together Michael's research, Elena began to understand why her husband had been so excited in his final weeks. He hadn't just been chasing a vague treasure legend. He had systematically uncovered evidence of a specific hidden fortune, assembled clues to its location, and been on the verge of accessing it. When he died, "Jack," she said quietly, "what do we do now?" Jack considered the question carefully. "First, we need to secure what we found. Then we need legal advice. This gold has been hidden for over 130 years, but it still belongs to someone. Who? Harrington died without heirs. The mine owners he stole from are long gone. The ranch has changed hands multiple times since then. That's why we need legal advice," Jack replied. "But Elena, as the current property owner, you may have the strongest claim to what's been found here." The implications were staggering. If Elena could establish legal ownership of the treasure, the failing ranch would transform from a financial burden into a fortune. The foreclosure threatening in just 68 hours would become irrelevant. Her financial struggles would end overnight. But as the initial excitement began to fade, Elena felt a growing unease. If Michael had been this close to discovering the vault, had his death truly been natural? The timing seemed too convenient, finding the entrance one day, dying the next. "Jack," she said slowly, "do you think Michael's death might not have been an accident?" Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" "The timing. He finds the entrance to the vault, calls me excitedly saying he's about to make a huge discovery, and then dies before he can show anyone. Doesn't that seem suspicious? You think someone killed him to prevent the discovery?" "The medical examiner ruled it a natural death, an aneurysm." "I know, but—" Elena hesitated, unsure how to articulate her growing suspicion. What if someone else knew about the vault? What if Michael wasn't the only one researching Harrington's secrets? As if in answer to her question, the sound of a vehicle approaching the ranch house drew their attention. Through the small basement window, Elena could see an unfamiliar black SUV pulling into the driveway. "Are you expecting anyone?" Jack asked, moving to the window. "No," Elena replied, feeling a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the basement's temperature. They watched as two men in suits emerged from the vehicle, surveying the property with the calculated assessment of professionals rather than the casual interest of visitors. "They don't look like bank representatives," Jack observed. "Or real estate agents," Elena added. "They look like federal agents," Jack finished her thought. The men approached the front door, and Elena and Jack could hear the firm knock even from the basement. Their discovery, hidden for over a century, had somehow drawn attention within hours of being found. "What do we do?" Elena whispered. Jack considered their options. If they're legitimate federal agents, we should cooperate. If not, the unspoken implication hung in the air between them. Their incredible discovery had suddenly become complicated in ways neither of them had anticipated. The treasure that could save the ranch might also put them in danger from forces they didn't yet understand. Close the vault, Elena decided. Replace the stone. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we reveal what we found. They quickly returned to the hidden chamber, closing the safe and making sure nothing appeared disturbed. Then they carefully moved the stone back into place, concealing the entrance to the secret room that had remained hidden for over a century. As the knocking at the front door grew more insistent, Elena and Jack prepared to face whatever complications their discovery had unleashed. The failing ranch had revealed its secrets, but those secrets came with consequences neither of them had anticipated. Ready? Jack asked as they reached the top of the basement stairs. Elena took a deep breath, thinking of Michael's excitement, his belief in the ranch's hidden potential, and his untimely death on the verge of discovery. Ready, she replied, squaring her shoulders. Let's find out who else knows about Thomas Harrington's vault. The failing cattle ranch that had seemed like such a burden now held a $200 million secret, and Elena Blackwood was about to discover that some inheritances come with unforeseen complications. Before we continue with Elena's confrontation with the mysterious visitors, tell us in the comments below if you've ever discovered something valuable in an unexpected place. And if this story of hidden treasure has captivated you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something truly special for you. Elena stood in the ranch house foyer, her heart pounding as she opened the front door. The two men in dark suits regarded her with professional detachment. Elena Blackwood? The taller agent asked, his voice clipped and formal. Yes, that's me, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. I'm Special Agent Dominic Reeves with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he said, presenting credentials. This is my partner, Special Agent Marcus Chun. We'd like to ask you some questions about this property. Elena exchanged a quick glance with Jack, who had positioned himself strategically beside her, before inviting the agents inside. The living room, with its scattered research materials and maps, suddenly seemed incredibly incriminating. What brings the FBI to Sweetwater Valley? Jack asked, attempting to sound casual. Agent Reeves' eyes scanned the room, taking in Michael's research materials with obvious interest. We're investigating a series of historical artifact thefts across Montana. Several items connected to the gold rush era have disappeared from private collections and small museums over the past 3 years, and this concerns me. How? Elena asked, fighting to keep her voice neutral. Your late husband, Michael Blackwood, made inquiries about several of these artifacts before they disappeared, Agent Chun said, pulling out a small notebook. His name appears in visitor logs at the affected museums, and he corresponded with several of the collectors. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. They suspected Michael had been involved in the thefts. My husband was a historical researcher, Elena said firmly. He was writing a book about Montana's gold rush era. Of course he visited museums and contacted collectors. Agent Reeves nodded as if he'd expected this response. Mrs. Blackwood, we're not accusing anyone of anything. We're simply following leads in an ongoing investigation. Your timing is interesting, Jack interjected. The bank is foreclosing on this property in less than 3 days. Why the sudden interest now? The agents exchanged a glance that Elena couldn't quite interpret. We received new information that suggested Mr. Blackwood might have discovered something significant shortly before his death, Agent Chun replied. Something connected to the original owner of this property, Thomas Harrington. Elena's blood ran cold. How could they possibly know about their discovery so quickly? They had only found the vault minutes ago. What kind of information? She asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. A letter was discovered among the effects of Gregory Mills, A collector whose gold rush artifacts were stolen last year, Agent Reeves explained. It was from your husband, claiming he had found evidence of a significant historical cache on this property. The letter was dated 3 days before his death. Elena remembered the letter. Michael had reached out to several historians and collectors in his final weeks seeking additional information about Harrington's connections. But he had been deliberately vague about his discoveries, never mentioning the vault or the hidden entrance. Michael was excited about his research, she acknowledged. But historical significance doesn't always mean monetary value. Of course, Agent Chun nodded. We're simply trying to determine if there's a connection between your husband's research and these thefts. Would you mind if we had a look around the property? Do you have a warrant? Jack asked bluntly. Agent Reeves smiled thinly. We don't need one if Mrs. Blackwood gives us permission. Otherwise, we can certainly obtain one. Elena knew she needed time to think, to figure out the implications of what they discovered and determine the best path forward. Allowing federal agents to search the property now, when they had just found the vault, seemed incredibly risky. I'd prefer if you did get a warrant, she said finally. This has been a difficult day, and I'd like some time to process everything. The agents accepted this with professional courtesy, though Elena could see the disappointment in their eyes. They left business cards and promised to return the following day, either with a warrant or to continue the conversation. As the black SUV pulled away from the ranch house, Elena turned to Jack with a look of disbelief. How could they possibly know about the vault? We just found it. They don't know about the vault specifically, Jack reasoned. They know Michael was researching something significant related to Harrington. That could mean many things. But the timing, Elena insisted. It can't be coincidence that they show up minutes after we make the discovery. Maybe not, Jack admitted. But right now, we need to figure out what we've actually found and what it means legally. We have less than 3 days before the bank forecloses. They returned to the basement, where Elena carefully examined the ledgers they'd removed from the safe before the agent's arrival. The detailed records painted a complex picture of Harrington's operation, a sophisticated network of transactions, moving gold between mines, banks, and private buyers, with Harrington taking a percentage at every step. This wasn't just skimming, Elena said, flipping through pages of transactions. This was a full-scale operation laundering gold from multiple sources. Some of these transactions involve names I recognize from Montana history books, senators, judges, business tycoons. Jack whistled as he examined one of the gold coins. These double eagles are in near-perfect condition. To collectors, they're worth far more than their gold value, maybe $15,000 to $20,000 each. And there are hundreds in those bags. That explains why Harrington kept them as coins rather than melting them down, Elena observed. He was preserving their numismatic value. As they continued their investigation, Elena found a small leather-bound address book among Harrington's personal effects. The entries were in code, names reduced to initials, locations described in vague terms, amounts referenced through some kind of substitution cipher. Michael must have been working on decoding this, she said, finding her husband's notes about letter frequency and pattern recognition. He was trying to identify the people in Harrington's network. The realization that Michael had been on the verge of uncovering not just a physical treasure, but an entire historical conspiracy made his sudden death seem even more suspicious. Had someone wanted to prevent this information from coming to light? Jack, she said quietly, I need to speak with Dr. Yellow Wolf. She's been studying Montana's gold rush history for decades. If anyone can help us understand what we've found, it's her. Are you sure we should involve others? Jack asked cautiously. The fewer people who know about this, the safer it might be. Dr. Yellow Wolf was working with Michael on his research. She might already know more than we do. Elena called the historian, careful to reveal nothing specific about their discovery over the phone. Dr. Yellow Wolf agreed to meet them at the ranch that evening, promising to bring materials that might help contextualize their findings. As they waited, Elena and Jack continued examining the contents of the vault, cataloging the gold coins and attempting to calculate their total value. Based on their preliminary count and the current collector values of the rare coins, they estimated the vault contained gold worth at least $100 million and potentially twice that amount when accounting for the rarity and historical significance of the collection. "This changes everything," Jack said, the initial shock finally giving way to practical considerations. "Even if the bank forecloses, they can't claim treasure found on the property if we document the discovery now." "But who does it belong to?" Elena asked. "Legally, I mean." "That's complicated," Jack admitted. "Treasure trove laws vary by state. In Montana, if we can prove Harrington obtained the gold illegally, it could be subject to state claim. But after 130 years, with no direct victims to compensate, the property owner often has the strongest claim," Elena finished. "Which means we need to prevent the foreclosure, at least until we can establish legal ownership of the treasure." The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted their discussion. Through the window, they could see Dr. Yellow Wolf's truck pulling into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Dr. Sarah Yellow Wolf was in her 60s, a Blackfeet tribal member and professor of Western American history at Montana State University. She had been one of Michael's most trusted colleagues, sharing his passion for uncovering the hidden aspects of Montana's past. "Elena," she said warmly as she entered the ranch house, "I've been worried about you since I heard about the foreclosure. Notice." "Thank you for coming, Dr. Yellow Wolf," Elena replied, leading the historian to the kitchen table where they had arranged some of the ledgers and journals. "We found something I think you should see." Dr. Yellow Wolf's eyes widened as she examined the materials. "These are Harrington's private records?" Michael suspected they existed, but we had no proof. "There's more," Elena said, placing one of the gold coins on the table. "Much more." Dr. Yellow Wolf picked up the coin, examining it with an expert's eye. "Double Eagle, 1880 San Francisco Mint. In remarkable condition." She looked up sharply. "Where exactly did you find these?" Elena described their discovery of the hidden vault, watching as the historian's expression shifted from academic interest to deep concern. "Elena, do you understand what you found?" Dr. Yellow Wolf asked. "This isn't just gold. These records document the shadow economy of Montana's territorial days, the unofficial flow of gold that shaped the state's development. Harrington wasn't just a middleman. He was a power broker who held compromising information on some of the territory's most influential figures. Which makes these records historically priceless," Elena concluded. "And potentially dangerous," Dr. Yellow Wolf added. "There are families in Montana who built their fortunes during this period. Families who might prefer their ancestors' methods remain buried in the past." The implication was clear. Their discovery threatened more than just historical narratives. It threatened reputations and legacies that had endured for generations. "You think that's why the FBI is involved?" Jack asked. Dr. Yellow Wolf's expression grew serious. "Those men who visited you, did they show credentials? Did you verify their identities?" "They seemed legitimate," Elena replied, a new worry forming. "Why?" "Because Michael contacted me about unusual interest in his research about 2 weeks before he died. Someone claiming to be from the Montana Historical Society had requested access to his findings. When he checked, he discovered no such person worked there." A chill ran through Elena. "You think Michael was being monitored?" "I think he stumbled onto something bigger than a hidden gold cache," Dr. Yellow Wolf replied. "These ledgers don't just document transactions. They document influence peddling, blackmail, and corruption that shaped Montana's transition from territory to statehood." The historian opened one of the ledgers to a specific page, pointing to entries that detailed payments to territorial officials. Look at these names: judges, legislators, newspaper editors. Harrington wasn't just moving gold. He was buying influence for his clients and creating insurance for himself, Elena added, remembering passages from Harrington's journal. He kept records of every transaction as protection. Protection that ultimately failed, Dr. Yellow Wolf noted grimly. His death was ruled an accident, but Michael suspected otherwise. Elena's suspicions about her husband's death crystallized into certainty. Michael found evidence that Harrington was murdered. He found newspaper accounts that contradicted the official death certificate. Witnesses who described seeing strangers at the ranch in the days before Harrington's death. A letter from Harrington to his sister expressing fear for his safety. The parallels to Michael's own death were too striking to ignore. Both men had been on the verge of revealing historical secrets. Both had died suddenly before they could share their discoveries. "We need to secure these materials immediately," Dr. Yellow Wolf said firmly. "Not just for their historical value, but for your safety. If the people who monitored Michael's research believe you found Harrington's vault, you could be in danger." "We can't just leave," Elena objected. "The bank is foreclosing in less than 3 days. If we abandon the property now, we might lose everything." Dr. Yellow Wolf considered this problem. "The foreclosure might actually work in our favor. If we can document the discovery through proper archaeological protocols, we can place the contents under state protection regardless of who owns the property." "How quickly can we do that?" Jack asked. "I can contact the state archaeologist tonight. With sufficient evidence, he can issue an emergency protection order that would prevent anyone, including the bank, from disturbing the site until a proper assessment is complete." It seemed like their best option. Official documentation would protect the discovery regardless of the foreclosure, while bringing in legitimate authorities would provide some measure of security against whoever had been monitoring Michael's research. "Do it," Elena decided. "But in the meantime, I want to understand exactly what Michael discovered and why it might have gotten him killed." They spent the next hour reviewing Michael's research materials, with Dr. Yellow Wolf providing crucial context for his findings. Michael had been methodically tracing connections between Harrington's operation and the development of Montana's political and economic power structures. He was mapping the hidden history of influence, Dr. Yellow Wolf explained, examining Michael's carefully constructed timeline. Following the money from Harrington's operation to the founding of banks, newspapers, and political dynasties that still exist today. One name appeared repeatedly in Michael's notes: Westmoreland. Harrison Westmoreland had been one of Harrington's major clients, a mining investor who had used the secret vault to hide profits from his partners and the government. According to Michael's research, Westmoreland had been at the ranch the day before Harrington's death. "Westmoreland," Elena repeated. "Why does that name sound familiar?" "Because his great-grandson is Senator James Westmoreland," Dr. Yellow Wolf replied. "Current chairman of the Senate Natural Resources Committee and one of Montana's most powerful political figures." The implications were staggering. If Michael had found evidence linking the Westmoreland family fortune to Harrington's illegal operations, it could explain why someone had taken extreme measures to silence him. Is there any chance Michael shared his findings with Senator Westmoreland's office? Jack asked, maybe seeking comment or clarification. Elena remembered a phone call about 2 weeks before Michael's death. He had mentioned reaching out to several prominent Montana families whose ancestors appeared in his research, offering them an opportunity to review his findings before publication. He believed in ethical historical research, Elena said. He wouldn't publish allegations about historical figures without giving their descendants a chance to respond. Which means he potentially alerted the very people who had the most to lose from his discoveries, Dr. Yellow Wolf concluded. The sound of vehicles approaching the ranch house interrupted their discussion. Through the window, they could see 3 black SUVs pulling into the driveway, their headlights illuminating the darkness that had fallen while they worked. "Were you expecting company?" Dr. Yellow Wolf asked, moving to the window with concern. "No," Elena replied, feeling a surge of anxiety. "Do you think it's the FBI agents returning?" "That's not standard FBI procedure," Dr. Yellow Wolf said, her voice tight. 3 vehicles, no lights or sirens. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a blocked number. With trembling fingers, she answered. "Mrs. Blackwood," came a smooth, authoritative voice. "This is Senator James Westmoreland. I believe you've found something that belongs to my family. I'd appreciate if you'd invite my security team inside so we can discuss this matter privately." Elena felt the blood drain from her face as she relayed the message to the others. The most powerful political figure in Montana was outside her door, laying claim to their discovery through what appeared to be a private security force rather than legitimate law enforcement. "He has no legal claim to anything on this property," Jack whispered urgently. "He knows that," Dr. Yellow Wolf replied. "Which is why he's here personally instead of filing a legal claim." Elena watched as men in tactical gear emerged from the vehicles, positioning themselves around the ranch house with professional precision. This wasn't just a social call or a legal dispute. It was a show of force designed to intimidate. "What do we do?" she asked, fear mingling with determination in her voice. Dr. Yellow Wolf pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the actual FBI and the state police. Whatever Westmoreland is planning, we need real law enforcement here immediately." As the historian made her calls, Elena faced a critical decision. The treasure they had discovered was historically priceless and potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But more importantly, it contained evidence that could shatter the foundations of Montana's political establishment, evidence that had already cost Michael his life. "Jack," she said quietly, "help me move as many of the documents as we can to my car. Dr. Yellow Wolf is right. We need to secure the historical evidence before anything else." As they gathered the ledgers and journals, Elena heard the firm knock at the front door that signaled the confrontation could no longer be delayed. The failing cattle ranch had revealed its secrets, but those secrets had drawn the attention of powerful forces who would stop at nothing to protect their family legacies. And Elena Blackwood, who had only wanted to honor her husband's memory by saving his beloved ranch, now found herself at the center of a struggle that had been simmering beneath Montana's surface for over a century. The $200 million treasure was just the beginning. The true value of what they had discovered lay in the truth it revealed about how power and wealth had shaped the state's history, a truth that some would kill to keep hidden. The pounding on the front door grew more insistent as Elena, Jack, and Dr. Yellow Wolf hastily packed the most important documents into canvas bags. The gold coins would have to remain in the vault. They were too heavy to transport quickly and would only complicate their immediate goal of preserving the historical evidence. "Mrs. Blackwood," called a commanding voice from outside, "I strongly suggest you open this door. We can have a civilized conversation, or we can do this the hard way." Elena's hands trembled as she zipped the final bag closed. "The state police should be here in 20 minutes, Dr. Yellow Wolf whispered. "We just need to stall them." With a deep breath, Elena approached the front door, leaving Jack and Dr. Yellow Wolf to continue moving documents to their vehicles through the back entrance. When she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Senator James Westmoreland, a tall, imposing man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I apologize for the late visit, but I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss." Behind him stood 4 men in tactical gear, their hands resting casually but purposefully near concealed weapons. The message was clear. This was not a request. Senator Westmoreland, Elena acknowledged, fighting to keep her voice steady. This is an unexpected honor. Though I must say, your security detail seems excessive for a simple conversation. Precautionary, he replied smoothly. May I come in? What we need to discuss is best handled privately. Elena reluctantly stepped aside, allowing the senator to enter while his security team remained outside, maintaining their positions around the house. She led him to the living room, painfully aware of the research materials still scattered across the tables and walls. Westmoreland surveyed the room with obvious interest, his gaze lingering on Michael's timeline of Harrington's activities. Your husband was quite thorough in his research, he observed. A dedicated historian. He believed in uncovering the truth, no matter how long it had been buried, Elena replied, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. The senator nodded thoughtfully. Truth is a noble pursuit, Mrs. Blackwood, but context matters. Historical events viewed through a modern lens can be easily misinterpreted. Is that why you're here, Senator? To provide context for my husband's research? Westmoreland smiled thinly. I'm here because my family has a long-standing interest in this property and its history. When I learned of your recent discovery, I thought it appropriate to discuss its implications personally. The casual reference to their discovery, which had happened mere hours ago, confirmed Elena's worst suspicions. They had been under surveillance, perhaps for weeks or even months. And how exactly did you learn about our discovery? She asked. Montana is a small state in many ways, Mrs. Blackwood. Information travels quickly, especially in certain circles. He gestured toward the chair. May I? Elena nodded, sitting across from him with her back straight and her mind racing. Each minute of conversation was another minute for Jack and Dr. Yellow, Wolf to secure the documents, and another minute closer to the arrival of legitimate law enforcement. I'll be direct, Westmoreland continued. The materials you found include sensitive information about several prominent Montana families, including my own. Historical context is crucial to understanding these documents properly. You mean the context of your great-grandfather using Thomas Harrington to launder gold and hide profits from his business partners and the government? The senator's expression hardened momentarily before returning to its practiced neutrality. As I said, viewing 19th century business practices through a 21st century lens can lead to misinterpretations. The territorial days operated under different standards. Fraud and corruption were illegal then too, Senator. Mrs. Blackwood, he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Let me be perfectly clear. The materials you've discovered have significant historical value, but they also have the potential to cause considerable harm if misunderstood or misused. My family is prepared to offer you a generous settlement for the exclusive rights to these materials. How generous? Elena asked, playing for time. $5 million, Westmoreland replied without hesitation. More than enough to save this ranch from foreclosure and secure your financial future. All we ask is complete discretion and the transfer of all materials related to Thomas Harrington and his associates. The offer was substantial, far more than Elena needed to save the ranch. But the implication was clear. The Westmoreland family was willing to pay millions to bury evidence of their corrupt origins. And if I decline? The senator's smile disappeared entirely. Then things become considerably more complicated. This property is facing foreclosure in less than 3 days. Banks can be influenced. Titles can be challenged. Historical artifacts can be claimed under various statutes. The legal process could tie up any potential value in these discoveries for decades. It was a threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable. Accept our terms, or we'll use our considerable influence to ensure you get nothing. What about my husband's research? Elena asked, fighting to maintain her composure. His life's work? A tragic loss, Westmoreland acknowledged with feigned sympathy. But ultimately, just unfinished notes and theories. Without the primary sources to support them, they remain speculation. Elena felt a surge of anger. This man was proposing to erase not just historical truth, but Michael's legacy, the discoveries that had cost him his life. "Senator," she said carefully, "are you aware that the state archaeologist has been contacted about our discovery? Once it's officially documented, these materials will be protected under Montana's cultural heritage laws." A flash of genuine concern crossed Westmoreland's face. A premature action. Proper assessment requires experts who understand the historical context. My foundation employs several respected historians who would be better suited to evaluate these materials. Through the living room window, Elena could see headlights approaching in the distance. She needed just a few more minutes. "Your offer is generous," she acknowledged. "But I'm not the only stakeholder here. The historical community, the state of Montana, even the federal government might have legitimate claims to these materials. Those considerations can be addressed through proper channels," Westmoreland insisted. "My team includes legal experts who specialize in historical artifacts and treasure claims. We can ensure everything is handled appropriately." The approaching headlights were closer now, and Elena could see they belonged to multiple vehicles. Moving at high speed toward the ranch, the state police responding to Dr. Yellow Wolf's call. "It seems we might have additional stakeholders arriving now," she observed, nodding toward the window. Westmoreland turned, his expression darkening as he recognized the approaching vehicles. "Mrs. Blackwood, I strongly advise you to consider my offer before involving outside parties. Once this becomes a public matter, controlling the narrative becomes significantly more difficult. Perhaps that's exactly what historical truth needs, Senator. Less control, more transparency." The senator rose abruptly, his practiced political demeanor giving way to cold anger. "You're making a serious mistake. My family has shaped Montana's destiny for generations. We've built this state's infrastructure, created thousands of jobs, preserved millions of acres of wilderness. That legacy won't be tarnished by selective interpretations of century-old business practices. If your family's contributions are as significant as you say, surely they can withstand historical scrutiny," Elena replied, standing her ground as the first police vehicles pulled into the driveway. Westmoreland moved toward the door, pausing to deliver a final warning. "This isn't over, Mrs. Blackwood. In fact, it's barely begun. Consider carefully who you trust with what you've found. Not everyone's motives are as transparent as they seem." As the senator stepped onto the porch to confront the arriving state police, Elena slipped through the kitchen to find Jack and Dr. Yellow Wolf waiting by their vehicles, the bags of documents secured in their trunks. "We got everything we could," Jack reported. "All the ledgers, journals, and Harrington's personal papers. The gold is still in the vault, but the documentary evidence is safe." "For now," Elena said, watching as the senator engaged in intense conversation with the state police officers. "But Westmoreland won't give up easily. He offered me $5 million to turn everything over to him." Dr. Yellow Wolf's expression was grim. "That tells us how valuable these documents really are, not just financially, but politically. If the truth about how Montana's wealth was distributed during the territorial transition became public, it could rewrite the state's history," Elena finished, "and undermine the legitimacy of fortunes that have shaped Montana for generations." The confrontation between Westmoreland and the police appeared to be reaching a stalemate. The senator's security team had produced identification that seemed to give the officers pause, while Westmoreland himself was gesturing emphatically toward the ranch house. "We need to secure these documents properly," Dr. Yellow Wolf said urgently. "I've arranged for a team from the State University's Special Collections to meet us in Billings. They can begin proper preservation and documentation immediately." "What about the gold?" Jack asked. "We can't just leave it in the vault with Westmoreland's people still here." Elena made a quick decision. "I'll stay with the police and make a formal statement about the discovery. That should establish our claim to the contents, regardless of the foreclosure. You two get the documents to safety." As Jack and Dr. Yellow Wolf prepared to depart, a new set of headlights appeared on the access road, another convoy of vehicles approaching rapidly. More police? Jack wondered. Dr. Yellow Wolf shook her head. Different pattern of lights. Those are federal vehicles. Elena felt a surge of both hope and apprehension. Federal involvement could protect their discovery from Westmoreland's influence, but it could also complicate their claims to the treasure. The new vehicles pulled up alongside the state police, and several individuals in FBI windbreakers emerged. Among them, Elena recognized Agents Reeves and Chun from their earlier visit. "Looks like our friends are back," Jack observed. "With reinforcements." The scene at the front of the ranch house was becoming increasingly complex. State police officers, Westmoreland's security team, and now federal agents, all converging around what had been, just that morning, a failing cattle ranch on the verge of foreclosure. "Go," Elena urged Jack and Dr. Yellow Wolf. "Get the documents to safety. I'll handle things here and meet you in Billings when I can." As their vehicles pulled away, using a service road that bypassed the main driveway, Elena steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. The treasure they had discovered was bringing powerful forces into conflict, and she was determined to ensure that Michael's discoveries would not be buried again. When she returned to the front of the house, she found a tense standoff developing. Senator Westmoreland was engaged in heated discussion with the lead FBI agent, while the state police officers looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Blackwood," Agent Reeves acknowledged as she approached, "we have a federal warrant to search these premises in connection with an ongoing investigation into historical artifact theft." "This is completely unnecessary," Westmoreland interjected. "Mrs. Blackwood and I were having a productive discussion about preserving historical artifacts with appropriate context. Is that why your security team has established a perimeter around private property without legal authority?" the lead FBI agent asked pointedly. Elena decided it was time to take control of the situation. "Agent Reeves, my husband discovered a hidden vault containing historical documents and gold dating back to the 1880s. These materials appear to document financial transactions during Montana's territorial period, including evidence of corruption involving several prominent historical figures." Westmoreland's expression darkened. "These are unsubstantiated claims based on incomplete historical records. Context is essential before drawing conclusions. That's why I've contacted the state archaeologist and arranged for proper documentation and preservation," Elena continued. "I'm happy to cooperate fully with your investigation, Agent Reeves, but I want to ensure these materials are handled according to proper archaeological and historical protocols." The FBI agent nodded, seemingly satisfied with this approach. "We'll need to secure the site immediately and document everything in place. Our forensic team specializes in historical artifacts." "This is outside federal jurisdiction," Westmoreland objected. "These are Montana historical artifacts on private property." "Actually, Senator," Agent Reeves replied, "if these materials are connected to the interstate transportation of stolen gold during the territorial period, that places them squarely within federal jurisdiction. And given your family's historical connection to these materials, I'm sure you understand why independent federal assessment is appropriate." The senator's security team shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to proceed now that legitimate federal agents had asserted authority over the situation. "Mrs. Blackwood," Agent Reeves continued, "would you be willing to show us this vault?" Elena hesitated, unsure whether to trust the FBI agents completely. Westmoreland's warning about being careful who she trusted echoed in her mind. But securing federal protection for the discovery seemed like the best immediate option. "Of course," she agreed, "but I want everything properly documented and preserved. These materials aren't just valuable as gold, they're historically priceless. As Elena led the FBI agents toward the basement, she noticed Senator Westmoreland. Speaking urgently into his phone, his expression a mixture of anger and calculation. Whatever happened next, it was clear the powerful politician was not surrendering his family's interests without a fight. The basement was soon filled with FBI forensic specialists photographing and documenting the hidden vault and its contents. Elena watched as they carefully cataloged each gold coin, each artifact, treating the discovery with the professional respect it deserved. "This is extraordinary," Agent Reeves acknowledged as he examined the vault. "One of the most significant historical discoveries in Montana in decades." "My husband dedicated years to researching this," Elena said. He believed understanding the true financial flows during Montana's formative period was crucial to understanding its development. "And some people would prefer that understanding remain buried," Reeves observed. Senator Westmoreland's interest in this discovery goes beyond simple historical curiosity. "He offered me $5 million for exclusive rights to everything we found," Elena revealed, "and threatened to make things complicated if I refused." The agent nodded as if this confirmed his suspicions. The senator's family foundation has been linked to several unusual acquisitions of historical materials over the years, items that subsequently disappeared from public access. "Burying history to protect a legacy," Elena murmured. "A common practice among certain families," Reeves agreed. "But this discovery may be too significant to contain." As the documentation proceeded, Elena received a text from Jack confirming that he and Dr. Yellow Wolf had reached Billings safely with the documents. The State University's Special Collections team was already beginning preservation work, creating digital backups of everything before proceeding with physical conservation. By midnight, the FBI had established complete control of the ranch house, with agents stationed at all access points. Senator Westmoreland and his security team had withdrawn, though Elena had no doubt they were regrouping rather than retreating. "We'll maintain security here until everything is properly documented and transferred to a secure facility," Agent Reeves assured her. "But Mrs. Blackwood, you should be aware that powerful interests will continue to pursue these materials. The historical record your husband uncovered threatens narratives that have been carefully maintained for generations." "What about the foreclosure?" Elena asked. "The bank takes possession in less than 3 days. That process can be legally suspended now that the property has been designated an archaeological site of significance," Reeves explained. "Our legal team is already preparing the necessary injunctions." For the first time since discovering the vault, Elena felt a measure of relief. The immediate threat to the ranch had been temporarily neutralized, and the discovery was being properly documented by legitimate authorities. But she knew the struggle was far from over. As dawn broke over the Montana landscape, Elena stood on the ranch house porch, watching the sunrise illuminate the property that had been Michael's passion and legacy. The failing cattle ranch that had seemed like such a burden now stood at the center of a struggle between historical truth and powerful interests, determined to protect their carefully crafted narratives. Her phone rang, Dr. Yellow Wolf calling with an update. "Elena, the documents are safe and being properly preserved. But you need to see what we found in Harrington's private journal. There are entries specifically about Harrison Westmoreland that explain why the senator is so desperate to obtain these materials." "What kind of entries?" Elena asked. "Evidence that the original Westmoreland fortune wasn't just built on hidden mining profits, but on systematic fraud that left dozens of legitimate claim holders penniless. Harrington documented how Westmoreland used political connections to invalidate legal claims and seize productive mines from their rightful owners. The implications were staggering. The Westmoreland family century of political and economic influence in Montana had been built on a foundation of corruption and theft, a truth that had remained hidden in Harrington's vault for over a century. "There's more," Dr. Yellow Wolf continued. "Michael had already transcribed parts of these journals. We found copies in his email archives. He sent some of this information to historians at 3 different universities just days before his death, creating a record that couldn't be easily erased. Elena felt a surge of pride in her husband's foresight. Even as he pursued the truth, he had taken steps to ensure it would survive him if necessary. He knew the risks, she realized aloud. He understood what he was uncovering and took precautions. Your husband was not just a brilliant researcher, Elena. He was a man of principle who believed historical truth belonged to everyone, not just those with the power to control it. As FBI agents continued their methodical documentation of the vault's contents, Elena felt a growing sense of purpose. The $200 million treasure was just the beginning. The true value of what Michael had discovered lay in the historical record, the documentation of how Montana's wealth and power had been distributed during its formative years. This wasn't just about saving a failing ranch anymore. It was about honoring Michael's legacy by ensuring the truth he had uncovered would finally be revealed. Against the combined forces of political power, generational wealth, and carefully maintained historical narratives, Elena Blackwood was determined to stand firm. The treasure vault hidden beneath the struggling cattle ranch had remained sealed for over a century, preserving not just gold, but truth. And now that truth, like the morning light spreading across the Montana landscape, would not be so easily contained again. 3 weeks after the discovery of the vault, Elena sat in the conference room of the Montana Historical Society in Helena, surrounded by historians, archivists, and legal experts. The long mahogany table was covered with carefully preserved documents, Harrington's ledgers, journals, and correspondence, now protected in acid-free sleeves and conservation folders. The preservation work is nearly complete, Dr. Yellow Wolf announced to the assembled team. We've digitized every document and created a searchable database of Harrington's records. The historical significance of this collection cannot be overstated. It provides unprecedented insight into the financial networks that shaped Montana's transition from territory to statehood. Elena felt a quiet pride as she watched the historians poring over Michael's discovery. The ranch had been officially designated a historical site of exceptional significance, protecting it from foreclosure and ensuring that the vault and its contents would be properly preserved for future generations. Mrs. Blackwood, said Dr. Marcus Reynolds, the state archaeologist, I've completed my assessment of the gold coins and bullion from the vault. Based on current market values and the exceptional numismatic significance of the collection, we're looking at a total value of approximately $212 million. A murmur ran through the room. Despite weeks of work, the sheer scale of the discovery remained staggering. As the property owner who discovered these materials, Reynolds continued, Montana law entitles you to 70% of the financial value, with the remaining 30% allocated to the State Historical Trust. That's nearly $150 million, Mrs. Blackwood. Elena nodded, still processing the transformation of her circumstances. From the brink of foreclosure to enormous wealth in less than a month, it was a change that still felt surreal. What's the status of Senator Westmoreland's legal challenge? Asked Jack, who had remained by Elena's side throughout the process. Reynolds exchanged glances with the legal team before responding. The senator's attempt to claim ancestral ownership of the vault's contents has been rejected by the district court. His subsequent efforts to have the materials classified as state property have also failed, thanks largely to the documentation of Mrs. Blackwood's legitimate discovery claim. He won't give up easily, Dr. Yellow Wolf cautioned. The Westmoreland family has too much at stake. Elena understood the historian's concern. In the weeks since the discovery, their research team had pieced together the true significance of Harrington's records. The documents didn't just reveal how Harrison Westmoreland had built his fortune through corruption and fraud. They provided evidence of a systematic campaign to consolidate wealth and power among a small circle of territorial elites, using means that ranged from questionable to outright criminal. There's also the matter of your husband's death, said Agent Reeves, who had joined the meeting to provide an update on the FBI investigation. Our forensic team has completed their review of Michael's medical records and the circumstances surrounding his aneurysm. Elena felt her heart rate quicken. Despite her suspicions, there had been no conclusive evidence that Michael's death had been anything other than a tragic natural occurrence. We found certain inconsistencies, Reeves continued carefully. Toxicology samples preserved during the autopsy show traces of a compound that can induce symptoms similar to an aneurysm rupture. It's not conclusive, but it's sufficient to justify a full criminal investigation. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Michael had been murdered to prevent him from revealing his discoveries, it transformed their historical research into something far more immediate and dangerous. Do you have suspects? Elena asked, her voice steady despite the emotions churning within her. We're pursuing several lines of inquiry, Reeves replied diplomatically, including connections to individuals who may have been monitoring your husband's research. The legal counsel from the Historical Society cleared his throat. This development may impact how we proceed with the public release of these materials. If they're evidence in an active criminal investigation. These documents belong to history, Elena interrupted firmly. Michael gave his life to uncover this truth. I won't allow it to be buried again, even for a criminal investigation. Agent Reeves nodded with unexpected understanding. We don't need to suppress the historical record to pursue justice, Mrs. Blackwood. In fact, bringing this information to light may help us identify those with motives to prevent its discovery. As the meeting continued, Elena found herself increasingly certain of her path forward. The treasure they had found wasn't just valuable for its gold content, or even its historical significance. It was powerful because it revealed truth that had been deliberately concealed for generations. I've made a decision about my portion of the proceeds, she announced as the meeting was concluding. I'm establishing the Michael Blackwood Foundation for Historical Truth. Half of my share will fund ongoing research into the hidden financial networks that shaped Montana's development. The other half will restore the ranch as a research center and public education facility. Dr. Yellow Wolf smiled with approval. Michael would be proud. He always said that understanding our true history was more valuable than any treasure. The ranch was never just about cattle or land to him, Elena reflected. It was about uncovering the stories that shaped this landscape, stories that powerful interests tried to erase. As the meeting disbanded, Elena found herself standing alone with Agent Reeves near the building's large windows overlooking the Montana state capitol. The imposing structure, built during the period documented in Harrington's ledgers, now seemed like a physical manifestation of the power structures they were uncovering. Senator Westmoreland has called an emergency press conference for this afternoon, Reeves mentioned, checking his phone. Apparently, he's announcing his retirement from public life, effective immediately. Running before the truth catches. Up to him, Elena observed. Perhaps making a strategic retreat to protect what remains of his family's reputation. Reeves studied Elena with professional assessment. You've made powerful enemies, Mrs. Blackwood. The kind who don't forget or forgive easily. I'm not afraid, Elena replied, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. Michael believed this history deserved to be told, no matter the consequences. I won't dishonor his courage by showing less, the agent nodded with respect. We'll maintain security at the ranch until we've concluded our investigation. But I would advise caution going forward. Historical truth can be more threatening than any physical weapon to those whose power depends on controlling the narrative. That evening, Elena returned to the ranch for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. The property had been transformed. FBI evidence teams had completed their work, and now State Historical Society personnel were carefully documenting every aspect of the historic buildings and the vault beneath them. Jack met her at the entrance, clipboard in hand as he supervised the installation of a state-of-the-art security system. "Welcome home," he said with a warm smile. "Or should I say, welcome to the future Blackwood Historical Research Center." Elena laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "It still doesn't feel real, Jack. 3 weeks ago, I was about to lose everything. Now you're one of the wealthiest women in Montana and about to become one of its most influential historians," he finished. "Life can change in an instant." Michael always said this place held secrets that would change everything. She remembered, looking across the property with new eyes. "I thought he was being romantic about old legends and myths. I never imagined he was so literally right." They walked together toward the ranch house, which was already being carefully restored to its historical appearance while being updated with modern research facilities. The transformation from failing cattle operation to cutting-edge historical center was well underway. "Dr. Yellow Wolf called," Jack mentioned as they reached the porch. "The first academic paper based on Harrington's documents has been accepted for publication in the Western Historical Quarterly. It details how the Westmoreland fortune was built on manipulated mining claims and political corruption." "That's just the beginning," Elena said. Michael's research notes connect at least 12 prominent Montana families to Harrington's operation. The full truth will take years to uncover. "Some people won't thank you for it," Jack cautioned. "Revealing that the founding fortunes of Montana were built on corruption challenges a lot of cherished myths." "Truth is rarely comfortable," Elena acknowledged, "but it's necessary." Michael understood that history isn't just about celebrating accomplishments. It's about understanding the full complexity of how we got here, including the darker chapters. Inside the ranch house, Elena found her way to what had been Michael's study. The room had been carefully preserved, his research materials now properly archived, but his presence still palpable in the space he had loved. On his desk sat a framed photograph of the two of them, taken on the day they had first visited the ranch together. "I understand now," she said softly to his image, "why this place meant so much to you. Why you never gave up on it even when everyone else thought it was worthless." She placed beside the photograph a small gold coin, one of Harrington's double eagles that had been released back to her after authentication. The physical connection between past and present, between the hidden history and its modern revelation, felt deeply appropriate. A knock at the open door drew her attention. Dr. Yellow Wolf stood there, holding a leather-bound journal that Elena recognized as one of Harrington's personal diaries. "I thought you might want to see this entry," the historian said, opening the journal to a marked page. "It seems particularly relevant to your current situation." Elena accepted the journal and read the passage indicated. April 15, 1892. "I have come to understand that wealth itself is not the true measure of value. The gold I have accumulated means nothing compared to the truth I have documented. Those who build fortunes through deception fear nothing more than honest accounting of their methods. Perhaps this record I have kept will someday serve as correction to the false histories they will undoubtedly commission to glorify their names. Truth, buried for a time, has a way of surfacing when it is most needed." 7 days after writing those words, Thomas Harrington had been found dead at the bottom of his basement stairs. His hidden vault had remained sealed for over a century, preserving both his accumulated wealth and his meticulous documentation of corruption. "He knew," Elena said quietly. "He knew the risks he was taking by keeping these records. Just as Michael knew the risks of uncovering them," Dr. Yellow Wolf agreed. "Both men understood that some truths are worth protecting, even at great personal cost." "The difference is that Harrington's truth remained buried," Elena replied, a new determination in her voice. "Michael's won't be." The next morning, Elena stood on the porch watching the sunrise over the property that had transformed from burden to legacy. The struggling cattle operation was gone, but in its place was emerging something far more valuable, a center dedicated to revealing the complex, often uncomfortable truths about how wealth and power had been distributed during Montana's formative years. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. FBI arrests former Westmoreland Foundation director in connection with historian's death. The investigation was moving forward, bringing accountability not just for historical wrongs, but for recent ones as well. Jack joined her on the porch, offering a cup of coffee. Big day today. The first tour group from the Historical Society will be here at 10. Elena nodded, watching as morning light illuminated the property. I've been thinking about what we should call this place. The Blackwood Research Center seems too simple, and the Thomas Harrington Vault Museum doesn't capture the full significance. What about the Revelation Center? Jack suggested. It honors both the physical discovery and the broader unveiling of historical truth. Perfect, Elena decided. Because that's what this place represents, the revelation of truths that shape our understanding of the past and, by extension, our approach to the present. As they prepared for the arrival of the first official visitors, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a failing ranch had evolved into something far more significant, a mission to honor Michael's legacy by ensuring the historical record he had uncovered would be preserved and shared with future generations. The $200 million treasure had been just the beginning. The true value of what they had discovered lay in the historical record, the documentation of how Montana's wealth and power had been distributed during its formative years, and how those patterns continued to influence the present. Dr. Yellow Wolf arrived early, bringing with her a team of graduate students eager to begin working with the Harrington documents. We've already identified connections between Harrington's operation and 3 major banking institutions that still exist today, she reported excitedly. This research will transform our understanding of Montana's economic development. As Elena showed them to the newly established research library, she felt a profound sense of purpose. The failing cattle ranch that had seemed like such a burden had revealed itself to be the keeper of secrets that would reshape historical narratives and challenge established power structures. By midday, the property was filled with historians, journalists, and curious visitors, all drawn by the remarkable story of the vault's discovery. Standing in what had once been the ranch's main barn, now converted into an exhibition space, Elena addressed the gathered crowd. "Welcome to the Revelation Center," she began. "This place exists because one man refused to accept that some truths should remain buried. My husband, Michael Blackwood, dedicated years to uncovering the hidden history of this property, not for personal gain, but because he believed understanding our true past is essential to creating a more just future." She gestured to displays around them, carefully preserved documents, photographs, and artifacts that told the story of Harrington's operation and the financial networks that had shaped Montana's development. "The treasure we discovered beneath this ranch isn't just valuable for its gold content. Its true worth lies in the historical record it preserved, evidence of how wealth and power were accumulated during Montana's formative years, often through means that contradicted our cherished myths about frontier opportunity and equal access." The assembled guests listened intently, many taking notes or recording her words. Among them, Elena noticed several representatives from families mentioned in Harrington's documents, some looking uncomfortable, others seemingly curious about revelations that might challenge their family narratives. "This center is dedicated to revealing historical truth in all its complexity," she continued. "Not to assign blame to current generations for the actions of their ancestors, but to foster honest understanding of how our present circumstances were shaped by past decisions. Only by acknowledging our full history, including its darker chapters, can we move forward with genuine progress." As she concluded her remarks, Elena felt Michael's presence strongly, not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the living continuation of his passion and principles. The work he had begun would continue, expanding beyond what even he might have imagined. Later that afternoon, as the first official day of the Revelation Center drew to a close, Elena found herself alone in the basement where it had all begun. The hidden entrance to Harrington's vault was now preserved behind clear security panels, allowing visitors to see the stonework and symbols while protecting the historical structure. "You were right," she said softly, knowing Michael couldn't hear, but feeling the need to acknowledge his vision. This place was never just a struggling ranch. It was the keeper of secrets that needed to be told. A gentle hand on her shoulder made her turn. Jack stood there, respect and something deeper in his eyes. "The last visitors have left," he said. "But Dr. Yellow Wolf's team wants to stay and continue working with the ledgers. They found something about land transfers during the 1890s that might connect to current water rights disputes." Elena smiled. "Let them stay as long as they need. That's exactly what this place is for now." Together, they climbed the stairs to the main floor, where the ranch house windows framed a spectacular Montana sunset. The failing cattle operation that had seemed like such a burden had transformed into something far more valuable, a center for historical truth, a memorial to Michael's courage, and a resource for generations to come. The $200 million treasure had secured the ranch's financial future, but Elena understood now that the true wealth had been there all along, buried not just in gold, but in the historical record that powerful interests had tried to suppress for over a century. "You know," Jack said thoughtfully, "most people who find treasure just take the money and run. Buy an island, live in luxury, forget about responsibility." "I'm not most people," Elena replied. "And this isn't just treasure. It's a legacy. Not just of wealth, but of truth." Michael understood that. Harrington understood it too, in his way. Some things are worth more than gold. As darkness fell over the Revelation Center, lights came on throughout the property, illuminating not just the physical spaces, but symbolically bringing light to histories that had remained in darkness for generations. The struggling cattle ranch had revealed its true purpose, becoming a beacon of historical truth in a landscape too often shaped by carefully managed narratives. And Elena Blackwood, who had inherited far more than she ever imagined, had found her own purpose as well, not just as the beneficiary of a remarkable discovery, but as the guardian of a legacy that would continue to reveal its significance for generations to come. The treasure vault that had remained hidden for over a century had transformed not just her fortunes, but her understanding of wealth itself, teaching her that the most valuable inheritances aren't measured in dollars, but in truth, courage, and the commitment to ensuring that buried histories don't remain underground forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.